heading off to the Consumer Action Law Centre in Melbourne, catch up with the CEO, Gerard Brody. Hello, Gerard.
Good afternoon, George.
Now, you've been very busy over the last month or two. You've an op-ed piece in the Herald Sun, I noticed, which was basically having a good fashion response to what the federal government has been contemplating doing, and that is not so much repealing some of the assistance or some of the support that the Royal Commission addressed and said to us at the time that there was a new culture in the banking sector that needed some cleaning up. And I remember in the op-ed piece you said it was incumbent on government to actually police the community or that sector much better than it was doing or had done in the past. Has anything changed in the last month or so since that op-ed piece?
Well, no. I mean, the Banking Royal Commission was now 2 years ago, and we've got to remember what it really found, George. It found that there's a culture of greed in our financial services sector, and that's greed driven by a sales culture about the need to make money, the need to meet targets, the need
the
to
bottom line.
get
The bottom line.
Yeah. And what that means for everyday people is that we're given and promoted products that might not be suitable, might not be affordable for our needs. And the Royal Commission's very first recommendation, it made 72, but its very first recommendation was that our responsible lending laws should remain intact. And the Commissioner also said those laws need to be more robustly enforced. Now, the federal government is proposing to repeal our responsible lending laws. So they're flying very much in the face of what the Royal Commission's final recommendations were.
Now, do you think they actually will go ahead with what Josh Frydenberg said back in September? Because at that time, it was a very different Australia. We were right in the midst of the pandemic. There were so many questions ahead as to how we were going to cope. Things have changed. There's been, as you said earlier in a previous discussion, there's been so much activity. We're seeing car loans, we're seeing loans for almost everything in the marketplace breaking records. People are buying homes because of the interest rates being so low. So do you think that maybe the federal government at the time was trying to maybe float an idea and they might hold back on that, or are they genuinely contemplating repealing some of those safeguards that the Hayne Royal Commission said we need in order to go forward?
Well, you're right. In September the last year, the Treasurer announced this proposal to repeal responsible lending, and his primary argument was he wanted to get credit flowing to help the recovery after the economic crisis caused by the pandemic. But if we look at the data put out by the likes of the Bureau of Statistics, the Reserve Banks, it's showing that credit is continuing to flow at great proportions in Australia. Home lending, owner-occupier applications are at their highest levels ever. Credit card lending, after going down for a number of years, is actually going back up again. And car loans as well, as you mentioned, particularly used cars. There's lots of lending out there for used cars. So I'm urging the Treasurer that to relook at this. The situation has changed. I mean, at this stage, they are pressing on with what they're doing. I was in Canberra just last week to appear before a Senate inquiry. So they have a bill before the Senate that they're trying to progress. But one of the messages I gave is that the situation has changed and there's no need to change our responsible lending. Credit is flowing and the economy is recovering.
I was going to say, if they do repeal some of those safeguards, it'd be tremendously difficult for all those witnesses that were put before the Royal Commission and some of the people who came forward, the whistleblowers, to help us identify some of the toxic practices that were going on. I would feel terrible for them. They'd feel enormously exposed, wouldn't they?
Absolutely. Now, my organisation, George, did represent a number of the witnesses that gave evidence at the Royal Commission, and including, a disability pensioner who needed to get a car but was sold one that she could never afford the repayments on. And she ended up sort of pawning her jewellery and even missing her rental payments to make repayments on that car. So the bank finally got paid, but her life was in very much disarray. Another case was a young woman who was given credit card limit increase after credit card limit increase, bundled with sort of junk insurance, which didn't help her. These people are now, asking us, was it worth it? If the government's going to turn around and repeal consumer protections, what was the point of the Royal Commission?
Yeah, very good point. Now, when can we expect to see a decision, one way or the other?
Well, in early March, I believe the Senate will report on this piece of legislation. And so perhaps in the time after that, we'll see where things land. It's going to come down to the crossbench, as so often it does in Canberra. And so we're very much talking to the crossbench senators about the harms that will cause people in their communities if these laws are repealed.
What can the public do to help in this particular case? Is it worthwhile? Is there a way that they can advocate as well, add their voice to the other voices?
Absolutely. I think it's really important that all of the public that are keen to ensure that consumer protection remains have their voices heard. No doubt the big banks and their lobbyists are having their voices heard. So I'd encourage people to contact their local MP or their senators in their state and let them know that consumer protection matters. Responsible lending or safe lending laws are essential in a modern economy and community like Australia.
Keep fighting the good fight. Gerard Brody, thank you very much for joining us and to give us a chance to cover a topic that is absolutely imperative and essential. If we're going to keep everything fair for everyone involved, especially the consumer, we need to be doing the right thing from the very beginning. Gerard Brody, once again, thank you for taking us through it. And let's see if we can catch up with you in March. Would it be early March or late March?
I think the 12th it's due.
Okay. Let's hope we can catch up again and have a chat and see where we sit. And let's hope it's on your side.
Thanks so much, George.
No worries at all. Gerard Brody joining us on The Informer.